Night of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to sell and trade this week. First guy, Dansby Swanson of the Atlanta Braves. So Swanson and this Brave team as a whole here, they got off to a horrible start the first 6-7 weeks of the season, but now they've been playing good baseball over the last few weeks here, winning 6 in a row and trying to get back in the hunt here in the NL East. On the season here for Swanson, 6 home runs, 26 RBIs, 9 stolen bases, 32 runs scored, a 280 average, and a 348 on bases. Swanson over the last few weeks as well here. He's hitting the baseball great. That batting average was below the Mendoza line about a month ago, but the last month he's hitting 314. So right now the power is coming back. And this Brave team, I think they were hung over a little bit from winning the World Series. And they're playing good baseball, but I don't think Swanson's going to finish the season up there with a great batting average. Last season only hitting in the 240s, but he did have 27 home runs. But even his home runs this season, the pacing is way back. The only thing he's really been great at this year, he is obviously the average with his hot streak and his stolen bases with 9 already on the season, where he did that all of last year. So Swanson's playing good base stop position in fantasy. He's a perfect guy to sell high, either for a good starting pitcher or a good bat. You needed another position, but with that shortstop eligibility, obviously, he's a perfect guy to sell high, and you get good value for him. May 31st at Arizona, 1 for 5 with a run. June 1st at Arizona, 1 for 4, 2 runs. June 2nd at the Rockies, 2 for 5 a run, 2 RBIs, a stolen base. June 3rd at the Rockies, 3 for 4 with a run. June 4th at the Rockies, 0 for 5. June 5th at the Rockies, 1 for 3 with 2 runs. And June 7th versus Oakland, 2 for 4. So right now he's batting second in this Brave lineup, and he's been a good table setter. But right now he's not doing much of power or driving in runs. It's just about batting average and runs scored, which is great, no doubt about it. But right now, well, he's hitting way over his head with 358 in the last few weeks here. I would definitely sell Swanson high, and I think I could get something good for him, especially that he's a shortstop in fantasy baseball. The next guy, Jock Peterson of the San Francisco Giants. Peterson, he went on a tear a couple weeks ago, including a 3-home run game versus the Mets. But right here, he's just another guy that's going to be peaks and valleys to the season, where he's going to go on crazy streaks and then he's going to disappear for a month and do nothing. So on the season, 13 home runs, 30 RBIs, 24 runs scored, a stolen base, 270 average, and a 346 on base. So right here, I'll give Peterson this season that his strikeouts are down, only 29 in 137 at-bats, and he's definitely changed his approach, and this is why he came out of the gates hot. Last season, only 18 home runs for him between the Braves and the Cubs in 430 at-bats and only a 238 average. So this season, a different approach he's bringing, and he's playing good baseball. But right now, I think he's going to go into another cold streak here, Peterson, where I could see that average drop in the 230s, 240s like it usually is for him. So the last few games, May 31st at Philly, 2 for 3, a homer, 2 RBIs. June 1st at Philly, 0 for 4. June 2nd at the Marlins, 1 for 4. June 3rd at Miami, 1 for 3 with a homer and RBI, 3 runs scored. June 4th at Miami, 1 for 3 with a run. And June 7th versus the Rockies, 1 for 4 with a run. So right here, the power is definitely legit for Peterson. We've seen him in his career hit 25, 30 home run season. But everything else, I just don't buy into it. And he's still a guy that's not playing a lot versus lefty pitches, which is obviously a problem, where there's some weeks he's only going to play 3 or 4 times a week if they got a lot of lefties on the schedule. So right here, while his power and batting average is off to a great start, I think I could trade Jock Peterson and get a good starting pitcher or just another bat that you have more confidence in this season. The next guy's Brandon Rogers of the Colorado Rockies. So Rogers, a former top prospect in this Rocky system, and he's got good versatility for fantasy at 2 weak positions at second and short. On the season, 6 home runs, 26 RBIs, 28 runs scored, a 260 average, and a 309 on base. So right here on the surface, those numbers as a whole don't look great, but over the last month of the season here, he's playing great baseball as Rogers. 5 home runs, 17 RBIs, 20 runs scored, a 337 average, and a great 381 on base, but his on base to batting average ratio isn't great, only 50 points higher on the season. So the last few games here for Rogers, May 30th versus Miami, 1 for 2, 2 runs. June 1st versus Miami in a doubleheader. This is where the great selling point is here, in my opinion. 4 for 8, 3 home runs, 4 RBIs, 5 runs scored. June 2nd versus Atlanta, 1 for 5. June 3rd versus Atlanta, 0 for 4. June 4th versus Atlanta, 1 for 5 with a run. June 5th versus Atlanta, 3 for 5. Homer, 3 RBIs, 2 runs scored. And June 7th at the Giants, 0 for 4. So Rogers, the batting average is up this season. The power, still not all that great. He's got 4 home runs in the last week here, which obviously is fluky to me. But right now, he's a guy that's been picked up in a decent amount of fantasy leagues, but this is a great part about it. You could pick up a guy that obviously you gave up nothing to get, and then you could flip him in a deal for something with more value, and this is the case here, which I would do, obviously, with Brandon Rogers. So right now, while he qualifies at 2 weak positions, and he's on a power streak and his batting average is up, I definitely would sell him high this week and make a deal. The next guy, Kyle Farmer, same type of situation. It was a big pickup over the last few weeks here, and he's been hitting the baseball lights out here as Farmer, and he qualifies at 3rd and short. On the season's 5 home runs, 32 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, 21 runs scored, 271 average, and a 332 on base. But over the last month, he's hitting 371 with a 430 on base. And over the last 2 weeks, to get him out, 421 average with a 488 on base here with 4 homers and 15 RBIs. So he's really ramped it up over the last couple weeks here for this red team and fantasy owners is Farmer. So right here, if he's on your roster, he's another guy would flip and trade. I don't think he's going to keep this going, especially the last month, the tear he's been on. June 1st at Boston, 1 for 3. June 2nd versus Washington, 2 for 4, a homer, 3 RBIs, a stolen base. June 4th versus Washington, 1 for 3 with a run, 2 ribs. June 5th versus Washington, 0 for 4. June 6th versus Arizona, 2 for 3, 2 RBIs. And June 7th versus Arizona, 2 for 4 with a run and a stolen base. So right here, he's playing great as Farmer. And another guy, you picked him up, and now you can flip him in a deal for a pretty good starting pitcher, I think, with the shortstop eligibility, because he does play in a good hitter's park, no doubt. But I just don't think he's going to keep up these type of red-hot numbers the rest of the season. And the 5th and final hitter I would look to sell and trade this week's Alejandro Kirk of the Toronto Blue Jays. So this guy, he's been on some tear over the last 2 weeks of the season. On the season, 5 home runs, 16 RBIs, 23 runs scored, a 322 average, and a 401 base here, overtaking Danny Jansen at the catching position. No doubt about it in Toronto. But over the last few weeks here, 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, 14 runs scored, a 486 batting average, and a 548 on base. So this guy's pretty much getting on base every other at-bat is Alejandro Kirk. And he's been the hottest pickup of the week, added in 22% of fantasy leagues here. And catcher, we know, is a very weak position. And right now, while he's on this crazy hot streak where he's not getting out at all, you sell him high here as Kirk. I don't think it's going to be this legit, the stats, especially obviously hitting almost 500 in the last couple weeks, where last season he only hit 242 with 8 homers and 24 RBIs, and he's almost surpassed that already this season here. So Kirk, the last few games where he's starting to play every day here, June 1st versus the White Sox, 0 for 5. June 2nd versus the White Sox, 2 for 3. June 4th versus Minnesota, 2 for 4, a homer, 2 ribs. June 5th versus Minnesota, 1 for 3, a homer, and RBI, 2 runs scored. June 6th at the Royals, 1 for 4 with a run. And June 7th at the Royals, he's been wearing them out, 4 for 5 with a run here. So Kirk's on a crazy hot streak. And right here, this is a perfect example. You get a guy who's hot and tearing it up, and you sell him high here, because there's no way, obviously, anyone's going to have these numbers sustainable, especially in the last few weeks where he's hitting almost 500 and his on base is 550. So that's a few hitters I look to sell and trade this week here in week 9 of the fantasy baseball season.